Please enjoy this message from David Arquette sent in by the fabulous Carrie Tenney.
Hey Ryan, how are you? Thanks for doing the Scream podcast.
Like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. What comes to mind?
You are listening to Scream with Ryan C. Showers, the podcast for Scream fans just like you. Join Ryan every week as he takes a deep dive into the horror film series that defined the 90s and redefined the genre. Scream with Ryan C. Showers is your source for scene and quote analysis, character dissections, and the latest news about upcoming installments of the Scary Movie franchise.
I hear you like horror movies, Kirby, but do you like them as much as him?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers. Thank you for joining me. Oh my gosh. So this week, we are not going to be covering the news that erupted Scream Twitter last week, which was the fact that Jenna Ortega spoke out about her reasons for leaving Scream 7, and then Christopher Landon weighed in on certain things about his experience with Scream 7, including the fact that he says Jenna Ortega wasn't a part of Scream 7, that she was out by the time he had signed on in August of 23. In addition, he shared some really graphic stories about stuff that he went through as he was exiting Scream 7 in regards to what he calls toxic fandom and stuff about he and his family and his children were threatened. And, you can surmise that this is very similar to the experience I had with the Melissa Barrera fandom over the past year and a half. So we send our condolences to Chris, and I'm really glad that he shared. There's a lot of stuff that happened yesterday. There's a lot to dig into, and we're going to be dealing with this not this week, but next week. I really fell in love with this recording that I did with our friend Kevin Craven, and it's about Sidney and her love life, and we talk about Billy, Derek, Mark Kincaid, and then Mark Evans. So that is this episode. And to join me for this episode, I have my friend Ashley. Hey, Ash.
Oh, hi, Ryan. How are you?
I'm well. And honestly, I'm really happy to be talking about this topic today after we've had a rush of stuff with the news, and we're going to cover that next week, in next week's episode. So everybody just hang tight and enjoy our discussion of Sidney Prescott and her love life here. And it's weird, Ash, it's funny because whenever you say the word love life, it almost I don't want to say it takes away from the seriousness of, or at least what I think that these men bring out in Sidney, or what they bring out in her arc. But, how would you describe these men to her?
I mean, I guess from her perspective, some of them are very valuable and very valuable to her in a way that no matter how the relationship ended, I feel like she could maybe find something beneficial from that or something to learn from. Mm-hmm. But for us as of now, I really just see them as sideline characters. I don't feel like we get to learn enough of some of these guys. And they're guys that I actually would like to learn a little bit more about. I mean, the ones that we don't. I mean, there's one that we know a lot about, and he can kick rocks, in my opinion. But but I mean, that's such a good question. I think Sidney would be somebody who, when she cares for somebody, she cares for them forever. And even if something doesn't work out, I feel like she's somebody who would still have a place in her heart for the good memories and holding those dear. And then for the people who for somebody like Billy Loomis, I feel like she'd be screw you, dude. I feel like she is somebody who would learn to let that go and learn from that experience. I guess what I would just say is I feel like all the people in her life that she's loved as a partner, I feel like she's probably learned something from them.
Yeah. Well, so just real quick, let's just do a speed round, maybe 30 seconds on each guy from your perspective. What are your thoughts on Sidney's 4 relationships that we've seen and not seen so far, but that we know of, right? So Billy Loomis.
Loser. I imagine he's not good in bed. I bet he thinks he is. I bet he uses way too much Axe body spray or like Calvin Klein. I think that he looks in the mirror a lot, like broods, and he thinks he's James Dean, but he never will be. Um, I think he's creepy in a way that you don't know he is. And yeah.
Derek Feldman.
Derek. I think Derek seems really sweet. I think he seems like one of those guys who kind of like is like a guys will be like is like hangs out with his guy friends.
Yeah.
But he also is and like maybe he'll be a little bit of like a quote like that stereotypical jock character. But I think there's like a really sensitive, sweet side behind him, and he seems like he will put aside all the toxicness that is around him, like any like toxic masculinity, to be like, no, I like this girl. I'm going to show her that I like her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he would be like one of those guys that if he had like a daughter, he would like let her paint his nails and like, you know what I mean? Like he seems like he'd be like one of those guys who would grow out of all like the bullshit and be a really good person and a loving partner.
Well, it's funny you say that, like, and I love the way that you phrase that, because like Derek, now that you say that, I never thought about him in this way before, but like he is the type of guy I would imagine is a guy's guy, likes to hang out with the guys and drink beer, right? But like I also think that I feel like he's the type of I don't think if he and I were like in the same age group, we wouldn't hang out, but I think he would be really nice to me in social situations. And I like that vibe. We're good with that vibe. We stand that vibe. So how about Mark Kincaid?
I feel like I'm going to be a little controversial here.
Go for it.
I never saw him as like a love interest, like until like more recently, how like people like until they said Mark.
Yeah.
In what Scream 5, right?
Yeah.
I never thought of him as a love interest. I thought of him as just like the guy who helped her, and like now they've become like friends. Like I never saw him as like a full love interest. Like I thought like maybe like a spark, but I never thought of it as being like a full on relationship.
Yeah.
I also find him like kind of obnoxious in parts. Like when he's like whispering to her, he's like, "My life." Is that what he says? He says,
Yes.
And I'm just like, oh my God. If a man ever looked at me after I was just terrorized, and I said, "What's your favorite scary movie?" And he said, "My life," I would walk away. I'd be like, "You know what? I'm going to handle this on my own." Like, can Detective Wallace come with me? At least he had like, what's going on? And like, and don't get me wrong, like I like Mark. I think he's super fun. I just like had never really thought about it until that happened. And my initial reaction was, they're talking about a different one. That cannot be right. Like, but I know a lot of people really love them together. And so then like, I try to watch it from a different perspective. And like, I can see all those like little moments. It just wasn't my initial thought. And if you do love them together and ship them together, like, I think that's really lovely, because I think Sidney deserves something super fun. And if you find love in, like a movie set where someone's trying to murder you, I mean, go for it,
Well, so that's the thing about Mark Kincaid that I think is cool, is because it wasn't so explicit it wasn't like beating us over the head with it. And I think that's actually interesting from like a feminist perspective, that Sidney has a lot on her plate right now. She literally has no time for romance. But I think what Wes was doing with Mark Kincaid was just I'll use the word spark, just giving us the hint of a potential somebody, a man who she can grow to trust and who can understand her in a way that her other boyfriends didn't, even in the way that her father can't in some ways. And I think that's just what those meaningful conversations were. Because like in some ways, you're right. I mean, they aren't a full-blown love relationship, in the traditional sense, in like the Titanic sense, in the Derek and Sidney, in the Billy and Sidney sense. But there is just enough where, I think that he respects her, and it's planted. The seeds are planted for it to be interesting to think about and muse about. and just that there was potential there. And I think that's like the whole thing about Scream 3, that it doesn't prioritize, and not that like Scream 2 did either, but like it doesn't prioritize a relationship as Sidney's main storyline. And that's the cool thing about Sidney Prescott, is that a man has never really been that to her. I mean, Billy is kind of sort of, but I would argue that Sidney's storyline in Scream 1 is about her and her trauma with her mother. So
for sure, I completely agree. I feel like the men it's like kind of rare to have a female lead where like a relationship isn't such a predominant part of it. And what I like about Mark is I think it shows that Sydney's still open to trust in certain things. And I think anybody in her circumstances maybe wouldn't.
Yeah.
But you can just see how she's like, she has like those like little moments where she's kind of looking at him and like, she thinks he's hot. Like you're just like, I mean, it's Patrick Dempsey. I think a lot of us, McDreamy, we get it. And honestly, I think some of my bias is also because like I'm such a big Grey's Anatomy fan, and
Exactly.
I'm so everybody, but I do not like Derek Shepherd.
Yeah.
I am somebody who was just like, break up. I was like, stop being mean to Meredith.
Well, so with Mark Evans now, we know that it's not Kincaid. I remember whenever it was announced, you were optimistic about Mark Evans. So what are your musings about the potential of Mark Evans?
I'm personally really excited about it. I've always enjoyed Joel McHale in different performances. I know he can come off kind of like douchey, I think is like the word that I would see the most. But I've been following him for a long time, and I think that's just kind of like a public jokey persona. But I think he could play like a funny dad really well. And I think like I can just see a daughter being like, when like teenagers start calling their parents by their first name to like be obnoxious.
Yeah.
I could see her being like, Mark, can you pass, like a daughter being like, Mark, can you pass the milk or something like that? or the orange juice, Mark. And Cindy being like, don't call him that, meaning like call him dad.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, like,
Mr.
she's like
Evans.
known too many Marks. She doesn't want to get confused on who you're talking about. You know what I mean? Like I can see him
oh my
making
God.
like a funny joke about how like she's like he's Mark and like she dated a different Mark before. Like I can see him being playful and then like kissing her on the forehead. Like that's my picture. Like a funny, cute banter, almost like Chandler and Monica in Friends. Like this like really cute little bantery thing. But I feel like I could see somebody like if somebody has a lot of humor. I can see that being really calming to somebody like Sydney,
right?
Who's like been through like such great trauma,
right?
And honestly, people who are really funny tend to have lived lives that they've experienced lots of trauma, because like a lot of humor comes from like a coping mechanism, and that's how like a lot of like if you listen to the lives of a lot of popular comedians or really actors that have a great comedic timing, I feel like there's some connection there, and also. He's in Yellow Jackets right now.
Right.
And so it's been fun to see him with Jasmine. And like, he's like really ripped right now. Like he looks very nice. I didn't mean to sound like Borat there. Oh my God. I just meant to...
So this morning,
he looks handsome.
Listener, this morning, Ashley said to me, like, I don't mean to sound like a leprechaun. So now when we went from a leprechaun at 5:30 this morning to now it's 7:30 and she's sounding like Borat. We love the cycle.
I know, because I think they said methinks or something, and I meant to be like, I think? What is
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Next is going to be Yoda.
So, this week's episode is about Sydney and her love life. And this was obviously a really fun topic to think about for a Taylor Swift Song of the Week. So if you don't know, Ashley and I have been doing Taylor Swift Songs of the Week. This is going to be the 11th or 12th Taylor Swift Song of the Week, which is so cool to think about. I mean, I love it. And this is, with Taylor Swift, like, so many songs can be interpreted as love songs. So, it was kind of like an embarrassment of riches. But the song we picked, I think, is excellent for the topic, and because we don't know what Mark Evans is like, and we can think about Sydney in this new relationship. But Ashley, what is the Taylor Swift Song of the Week?
The Taylor Swift Song of the Week is Delicate. Now, this is, I believe, our first Reputation song.
Yeah.
So Reputation was the 6th studio album. It was released in 2017. She has yet to release the Taylor's version, and I can tell you, we are waiting for it. This song was, understatement. This was produced by Max Martin Shellback, and Taylor Swift, and it was written by Taylor. This song, I really love it because I didn't realize how great this song was until I met my current partner, my fiance. I'd always thought it was great, but I just didn't connect to it in this way. And it's really about meeting somebody, falling for them, and you're kind of like going through your head of thinking of all the reasons why it might not work out. And a lot of those are due to your, like, what you are like thinking about are your flaws.
Yeah.
But you're really only seeing their good, like you're only thinking about their good qualities. Like and you're thinking of them as like this amazing person. And you're kind of like thinking like, well, why would they like, and I have all these things going on. And it's such like a lovely romantic song, like just talking about like so earnestly about how you feel when you first meet somebody and there's a spark. And I think it really connects to, it could be connected to any of the former male suitors in Scream.
Well, so it's so interesting because my favorite friendship bracelet I've ever received from anybody, and I probably have over 100 of them, was from Ashley. And specifically from, I guess, Squirrel and Spud. I don't know if you made it for Squirrel and Spud, but I assumed it was through Squirrel and Spud, which is Ashley's Etsy store. And it has like some of the nicest jewels I've ever had. Like, and I wear it all the time. It's black and like red. There's like a red jewel too, but it has the word delicate. And it's funny because Delicate was never one of my favorite songs from Reputation. So it was weird. I would walk around with this bracelet of Delicate, and it's not like, I wasn't like, I was more so into like the edgy, like moody, angsty songs in Reputation because of what I was going through at that time with like the Melissa Barrera people. And like, so it was just like Delicate was never like on the front of my brain. And yet I was always looking down at this bracelet that I had on that was from my friend Ashley. And then somewhere, it clicked. And it clicked of what she was like, what she actually is saying through the song is so me. And I'm sure a lot of people feel this way. It's about like the insecurity you feel specifically like in the beginning stages of a new relationship. And is it like the part of the chorus is it cool that I said that? Is it chill that you're in my head? Like, second guessing, like, and natural feelings that one has, but can be interpreted as needy. And like, specifically, I have had a lot of men in my life who are kind of jerks, that where the insecurity is dialed up. And I've definitely played this, the same kind of thing in my head of questioning, like, is it okay for me to do this or that without them getting mad or getting annoyed with me or thinking that I'm this or that I'm that. And basically the arc of the song is like, that she kind of relaxes into the relationship, and those I don't know if those start to go away, but they definitely I think that Taylor ends the song in a more secure place than where she started. What do you think, Ash?
Oh, for sure. I think what you said was just so nice. And I'm glad you really like your friendship bracelet. So that's all I'm thinking about right now, because you hype me up. But I think it's such a beautiful song because I think it's also relatable when like this huge pop star is saying like, is it okay that like you like she's like still being so vulnerable, and she's still like, she's like one of the most famous people on the planet. Like, people think she's gorgeous. She's got money and fame and all these things and maybe these like luxuries and all these privileges, but she's still, when there's a boy that she likes, she's still like, oh my God, is he going to think I'm like a dork for saying that? Is he going to think I'm too clingy? Is he going to, all of those feelings. And I think for so many people, the Eras tour like really hyped up this song because if anybody's been to the Eras tour or seen the movie, she's like walking on the stage, and like as like to the beat of the song, sometimes she'll like kind of like put her foot down a little bit harder on like in her like dance moves, and like you see the stage starting to look like it's cracking as if it's like made of glass. And for the song, isn't it delicate? And it also has like some of the best fan interactions with this song. So I feel like there's like this confusion and longing in the lyrics, but it is still like really like upbeat and like fun. And you guys can't see it, but I'm doing really terrible dance moves. But it's just like such a beautiful, and I feel like it's like one of her most romantic songs in my opinion, because it's just so honest. And I think true like actual romance and love comes from like being completely honest with your partner and like showing your vulnerability and them not putting their insecurities on you and them just accepting all of those things about you. And it seems like by the end, like when you hear like other songs or whatever, that she really felt loved. And she talks about how like my reputation's never been worse. So
Right.
totally get how Sidney, that I feel like that relates to Sidney in every single movie.
Well, so as Ashley alluded to, and by the way, listener, so our friend Josh Reinhold, he's been on the podcast before. He's going to be on the podcast in a couple of weeks. We have a really cool episode planned that we're recording soon. He actually sent me a voice memo of him describing what this song "Delicate," how it relates to Sidney. And he has this really cool idea about like how like the first half of the song is about her with Mark Kincaid, where she's a little unsure. She's not necessarily like in the best place herself. So then like there's more uncertainty, but then like the second half is all he calls it a sunrise. And then that it opens up a new potential and like a new way for Sidney, or a new opening for Sidney, which is Mark Evans. So he actually thinks that like, and you'll hear it in a couple minutes because we're going to play it after Ashley and I are done. He describes it like as like a transition from Mark Kincaid to Mark Evans, because we don't really know what happened with Mark Kincaid. They could have just hung out and talked. That they had this like dark connection, and that it probably wasn't best for Sidney long term. And going from whatever she was with Mark Kincaid to Mark Evans, who we are assuming is a lighter, more jovial, like more relaxed, friendly person. And he has a really good explanation for this. I'm going to save that for the listener, but I want to just go to what Ashley said and kind of tie it back to Sidney here in the last couple of minutes we have. So the song starts out and she says, "This ain't for the best. My reputation's never been worse, so you must like me for me. We can't make any promises right now, can we, babe? But you can make me a drink." And I think that is so interesting. Like, first of all, like this idea of like, this ain't for the best. My reputation's never been worse, so you must like me for me. That is how I felt whenever I would get new Patreons during the Melissa Barrera era, because like, her fans were really hell-bent and determined on like ruining my reputation. And, so there's an element of like just social acceptance with like that phrase and that lyric. But also when you're in a new relationship, it's like, and a relationship where you're used to playing different games. And then like, all of a sudden, like you're at your lowest, but someone's still showing interest in you. Like that shit cuts deep. You know what I mean? And like Ashley said, for Sidney, I think with Mark Kincaid, I think it really fits like for the end of Scream 3, when she's still kind of a mess at the end of Scream 3. He really likes her for her. And I like that idea. But like Ashley said, it can kind of apply to Sidney and with most of her male relationships. But Ashley, how would you say Delicate relates to Sidney and her love life? Because I have one other thing to say at the end, but I want to hear your thoughts.
I think it's just that there's so many lyrics here and there that hint to being vulnerable and insecure about things. Like I always thought, like when she's like, my reputation's never been worse, I always thought like that could relate to Billy really well.
Yeah.
Of the whole town, even though it might not be necessarily a bad thing, the whole town is talking about her. And like I would just say that I think especially in like smaller communities, when somebody is quote unquote exposed for having certain traits or whatever, a lot of times those are thrust upon their family and friends. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying any of that is right. And I am a proud Maureen supporter. But if there's all these rumors and nastiness going through the town, then that would be really thrust on her. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that she felt that so deeply. And I kind of like thinking about it in like the wrong way of her being like, "Oh, you must like me for me," to Billy. And it's just like, no, girl, you're wrong, but maybe later.
It's actually all about your moms today. That's why I'm into this.
Yeah.
But it's funny because like with Derek, I actually think he is the one that this least applies to because I think Sidney in college, she is so confident. And I don't think that she feels as burdened by this stuff as she does in the other movies for some reason. I don't know. With her connection with Derek, I don't sense any insecurity in terms of does Derek like me? I think that they are so connected in the beginning parts of Scream 2. It's really, I think that it's applicable to Kincaid, but I think that it's going to be so applicable to Mark Evans. And I think when we see Sidney in Scream 7, I think it's going to be a whole new Sidney we've never seen before. And, Taylor sings in the bridge here, sometimes I wonder when you're asleep, are you dreaming of me? Sometimes when I look into your eyes, I pretend you're all mine, all mine all the damn time. And I think that is probably how Sidney felt about Mark Evans as they were falling in love. And when Sidney was kind of like really starting to work out her emotional stuff and her trauma from everything that's happened to her over these years. And she really started letting her guard down and like actually allowing herself to feel loved and actually wanting it back from Mark. And I think that it's just going to be so interesting to see how Sidney is as a wife to him within their family and like how she's changed from him. And I hope that reflects. Ashley, what are your thoughts?
Me too. I hope with all my might that it's like a positive, happy relationship. And I really don't want him to die in the first movie. I know maybe it would happen eventually, but Sidney just has had like the worst luck with either like her boyfriend's trying to kill her or being murdered. So like, it's just like, that's too much. That sounded so silly, but I'm like, can we just like, and he's the dad, like he's like the dad to these kids. Like I would really love to see like a really positive relationship. And if we're not meant to like him, then kick him to the curb. I'm cool. Kill him all you want. But I really want it to be a really positive, like really fun, bantering relationship. Like that's what I immediately pictured. Mm-hmm. And not saying that I'm right, but it's just what I want.
It's possible. I think that, I think that anything's possible. And, the script has been heavily rewritten, so, I mean, who knows, it was supposed to be Dempsey. So I'm sure Dempsey didn't want to die. So who knows? I think that it's open and it's delicate not to be too on the nose about it. But I just think, just one last thought here. I think delicate is such a beautiful way to think about Sidney and about someone who has been through all of that trauma, specifically around relationships, both with Billy and then also kind of with Derek, because he died right in front of her when she didn't trust him. For her to, allow herself to be open to somebody like Kincaid. And then as Josh says, and what you're about to hear, kind of ease into Mark Evans and this, in the bridge and like the second half, the sunrise of the song Delicate. I just think it's so beautiful to think about Sidney opening up in that way and starting to shed off possibly insecurities that she had,
Mm-hmm. And I think something that this song made me think about is like being delicate, or like something being delicate doesn't necessarily mean it's not strong. Because I feel like there could be like that connection, or like if somebody, like I think people could call people delicate as an insult.
Yeah.
But I think it's really honestly a really beautiful quality in a lot of people is that they probably just need to have empathy, and they probably have something that like if they see something wrong, they're probably going to feel it strongly. And I feel like the more and more I've listened to this song and watched Sidney's journey, I feel like learning that somebody who is sensitive and maybe is what people might call delicate is honestly like a really beautiful quality and something to be admired, and means that you're probably stronger than a lot of other people out there.
Beautiful. Ash, where can they find you online?
So you can find me at Squirrel and Spud 9 on Instagram. Ryan and I do some fun posts, different kind of Scream puzzles and games on there. And my Etsy store is linked there. I have some fun pop culture merch. So I'd love to see you commenting on one of our games and see if you get the answers right.
What did I do without you? What did I do before you? I mean, life before Ashley, BA before Ashley. Well, Ashley is an amazing part of this podcast. Also, I have to thank TJ Jones, who is the graphic designer and producer of Scream with Ryan C. Showers. He has been doing reels, which are so cool. I'm so grateful to him. He has revolutionized the images and like the thumbnails for advertising the episodes. So he is fantastic. I need to thank my editor, Albert Padilla, without whom this show would not exist. He is the dad of the podcast. He is the one who keeps keeps it all going, man. So thank you to Albert. I need to thank Joey Velisi, who wrote a spec script for Scream 7. It's episode 112. And then he wrote a follow-up to that called Screams, episode 155. He's currently working on the final Scream, which is going to kind of be like a mirror of, what a Scream 7 could look like, that explores Sidney and Mark's marriage. So I also need to thank everybody over at Patreon. So if you haven't subscribed to the Patreon, please go over and subscribe. This month, we released an audio commentary of The Craft. So if you go over to Patreon, you can listen to me giving an audio commentary of The Craft. You can listen to it while you're watching the movie, or you can just listen to it like a normal episode. So, but I'm really proud of it, and I'm excited to do more of these commentary episodes. We're going to be doing Final Destination, Scary Movie. I know what you did last summer, Halloween H2O, and so on and so forth. And then we'll do the Scream movies at the end of the year. I also need to thank my Daddy Ghostfaces and Mama Ghostface, Carrie Tenney, Brett Janovich, Corey Wilson, and Stevie Shears, and my STAP investors. They include Allie, David D, Garrison Nichols, Gustavo Mora, Jess Mariano, Joey Nabrini, aka The Vault, Josh Calamari, Josh Carr, Scream Queens podcast with Josh and Justine, Kevin Abner, Mark Vieira, Philip Douglas, Roy Garza, and Sam Levy. Okay, guys, before I turn it over to my friend Josh for his little analysis about the song Delicate as it pertains to Sidney Prescott, but which first, by the way, for just a peek behind the curtain into the Scream with Ryan C. Showers Patreon, last year somebody changed the theme of our Instagram chat to a Taylor Swift album, like the background of the chat. And Josh came out, he's like, okay, that's enough. And to go from that to now, he is taking part of an analysis of Sidney Prescott crossed with a Taylor Swift song. It has been what I'm calling the Taylor Swiftification of Scream under the guise of Scream with Ryan C. Showers and Ashley Squirrel and Spud Summers, which we love. So, so one last thing about Delicate before I toss it over to Josh. Delicate has a really cool music video where it's Taylor kind of representing herself as a celebrity and kind of expressing something about herself here, which I really find quite interesting, and it relates to Sidney Prescott. So basically, the idea of the music video is Taylor is a celebrity going to an event, and she is not really being seen by the people she is interacting with, whether it be like the paparazzi and the press. She has like guards around her, and she just feels like she's like this object, not necessarily a human being who is being understood and can actually fully express who she is. And I think and the arc of the music video is that she eventually sheds that and is allowed to act goofy and just break free of that public persona. And for Sidney, I actually think it relates to her really well because, Sidney Prescott is the type of person who I'm sure is very, very guarded. And especially when she's meeting somebody new. And whenever she was meeting Mark Evans and they were going on to, build their family, there was probably a moment where, she had to let her guard down, right? And with Sidney, it could be even literal because in Scream 2 and Scream 3, we see how much security Sidney has at her property, even when she's out, in college with her bodyguards, right? And that's literally, we see the same kind of imagery in the Taylor Swift music video for Delicate. And I think it's so interesting that Sidney probably had a similar moment with Mark Evans when she met him, where she finally was able to express who she actually is on the inside to him in a more authentic way and kind of let her hair down and metaphorically do the goofy faces and the goofy dancing that we see Taylor do towards the end of the music video, and just kind of let loose and break free and show her authentic self, which I think is the beautiful thing about the song. I am not a music video junkie, but this is one of my favorite music videos. So anyways, I hope everybody whenever you hear us talking about a song you may not know, go and listen to it, give it a shot, and try to listen to it in the way that we're talking about it as it relates to Scream, and it will unlock something in you. Trust me. So everybody, please enjoy the rest of the episode. First, you're going to hear my friend Josh Reinhold. Then you're going to hear my conversation with our friend Kevin about Sidney Prescott's many relationships.
Okay. So obviously, in a broad sense, I think Delicate is a great match for Sidney's love stories and arcs because in a literal lyrical sense is probably quite in line with her inner thought process whenever she meets somebody. She probably feels an extreme sense of guilt whenever she starts to get close to someone, knowing that she's potentially putting them, in the line of fire. But I think what this song interestingly made me think of was the sort of transition from Mark Kincaid to Mark Evans. Something about like, and I don't know if I'm making this up in my head, but I feel like coming out of the bridge, the production and the sound quality almost creates what feels like this sunrise effect on a song that starts out feeling very dark and moody. And I feel like the first half of the song feels like the Mark Kincaid story, and the second half, well, it's less than half, but after the coming out of the bridge feels like maybe it's the Mark Evans story. And I just say that because it's a pretty song, but there is this like underlying sadness to it. Like she feels a lot of trepidation about getting this close to this person this quickly. I really like the line, about not being able to make any promises, but you can make me a drink, which I feel like is very much where Sidney is at the end of Scream 3, right? It's like, we don't get any sweeping promises. There's no real explicit declarations made between her and Mark Kincaid, but he can make her some popcorn and like be there, and they can have that moment, I feel like their sort of trauma bond and seeing darkness in each other, like reflecting their own inner darkness, is in my mind like very much at the core of Sidney and Mark Kincaid's romance. And while it was comforting as the button to the first trilogy, and it was a nice way to sort of leave Sidney off, in real life, I think like when you bond that way with a person, it's intense and it's real, but sometimes it sort of traps you in that dark place. So part of why I was like a lot less upset by the ultimate revelation that, it wasn't going to work out with Dempsey was this notion that like, I'd be really excited just to see Sidney with someone who's kind of, she almost feels like she has no business being with, because he's like a light, happy, sees the good in things person, and how that could bring those elements that were sort of taken from her by a slew of ghost faces over the years, but starting in her late teens, it's like her loss of innocence was so extreme that like just meeting a person that for the most part, like just sees good in the world and people and embraces joy and happiness, would be like such a satisfying thing to see for her, and could be like so healing, and she could grow a lot, versus being with a person that sort of keeps her down in that darkness. And I think that's kind of I don't know, it's more in the production and the sound of the song, because obviously the lyrics are quite repetitive. I mean, there is a journey, obviously, that she goes on from like the dive bar on the east side to like wherever they end up. And she's talking about, do the girls back home touch you like I do? I think like that line's interesting too, because I'm sure Sidney in a lot of ways feels like an alien. Like she just isn't like anybody else, And so I could see her wondering that, like, do you like, thinking in her mind, like, do these men I'm with ever just get nostalgic for women who are not everything that I am? But anyway, yeah, I think this song's really interesting. Like it kind of could be the bridge that people are looking for from Mark Kincaid to Mark Evans, because I do think that the song gets increasingly hopeful and wistful and less kind of rooted in darkness after the bridge.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this segment of Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers, and joining me, I have a returning guest, but it's been so long since he's been on, he's practically a new guest, but he's been a long-time listener, a long-time Patreon. I'm thrilled to have him here. In fact, I was telling him before we hopped on, like, it has been my personal mission. You can ask my creative producer, Ashley. I've been like, the guy Kevin from the Patreon chat. I've got to get him on an episode. So everybody, please welcome Kevin, Cravings. Hey, Kevin.
Hi, Ryan. I am so happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. So do you remember what episode you were on? I'm just curious. Do you remember much about that?
So I remember we were talking about Sidney and Gail outside of Woodsboro High. That's all I remember.
It was an episode about their dynamic, like one of the first like episodes about Sidney and Gail and like their relationship. It was episode 97. Okay, so long time. And so now this episode that we're recording now is, I don't know, 211. So I mean, like that's a long time to not be on the podcast, Kevin.
It is. I know. I'm sorry.
Well, so and I was thinking about it today because I know. In my brain, I have like a filing cabinet of like each Patreon, just like, I can whip it out. I know what their Scream ranking is. I know what their general feelings are. I don't know your Scream ranking. Oh my God. Can you believe that? Tell me your Scream ranking.
Oh my God, Ryan. Okay, so I think the girlies are going to eat me up for my ranking, but here we go. Here we go. Okay, so number 1 is 2. Mm-hmm. Then we have 3.
Oh my God. Ooh, okay.
Then we have 1.
Okay.
Then this is where the girlies may get upset. 6, 5, 4.
I'm perfectly. I like this ranking. This is cool. First of all, I love 2, 3 people. Like 2 and 3 people. Like they are my people. Like they get me. I don't know. Like just like I mean, everybody loves the original, right? But like the people I think who really understand 2 and 3, like that is the heart of the original trilogy. That's the building of Gail and Dewey as leads. That's Sydney's like really dark arc, to getting her, to the end, I love 2 and 3. Like I just feel like that's the Wes Craven magic almost. I don't know. So I love that. I love that you're a 2-3 person.
Yeah, I love the both of them.
Well, so why don't you walk me through this ranking and explain like what you love about each movie?
2 is just so well done. I mean, I think they're all well done, but 2 just has a place in my heart for some reason. It's the sequel. We have the same characters back. It's exciting to see them back. They're all slightly sharper, the trio, as well as Randy, because they experienced, the events of the first one. I love the characters. I love that we had Jada Pinkett in this one. That's why I love 2. I love that we got more Cotton as well. 3 is amazing because I saw 3 for my 12th birthday in theaters. And I was so excited. I knew Sidney was going to die. I was a nervous child, a nervous gay closeted child. And I just didn't know what was going to happen. Then 1, of course, the original, that's where it all started, right? That was the first one I saw as a kid. And, then we get to 6, which I feel like people are just like, girl, what are you talking about? Now, as a 6 fan, I can admit it's holes and it's mishaps. But it was an exciting film for me and it was a good time. And then, you got 5, which I did think Radio Silence did a good job with 5. I really do. I do feel like they took their time more with 5 than they did with 6. Mm-hmm. But, 5 was great. I saw 5 in theaters like 7 times. And then, 4. And 4 is last, but I love 4 so much. Like that too has a special place in my heart. They all do.
I love your ranking and I love the passion you have for each of the movies. And just like the love you have. I mean, I know I said passion, but and I know that love is a synonym, but like hearing you express each thoughts on each of the films, there's something I can tell that you're so genuine about these movies and that you understand them in a way. And it's so cool. So, okay, Kevin, thank you for continuing to support the podcast, even though I've been rough on 6. I'm just
of course. No, listen, Ryan, I love that we have this community, that you develop this community and that we can all have our own opinions. Like I love that you are so opinionated. Like I love that. So please don't change that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I do remember from the first time you were on, I remember for some reason I thought you were a 2 guy, so that's cool. 3 being in second place was a surprise for me. That's very fun. So that's so cool. Okay, so Kevin, this is like your first proper time being on the podcast because you were on in the Sidney and Gail episode a long time ago, right? But you haven't even done the speed round, which is shocking to me because you're somebody who first of all, you've been a Patreon for a long time, and like you're somebody who like every week I know like I know that you listen, you know, and I know that you will share your thoughts or your comments, and like you know, I feel like I look forward to seeing like the tweet or the message from Kevin every week. So and that makes me happy, and I appreciate people who are engaged and who appreciate what the show is trying to do. So I love that.
Of course. Ryan, I'm just so happy that I came across your podcast. I started listening before you started the Patreon. And when you did start, I was like, oh, I'm so excited that, you know, I could be a part of the community some more. So again, I'm just very happy that you have this.
You know what else is another memory of mine of you? So I remember the Sidney and Gale episode. I know, you know, just the messages, the nice messages every week with the you know, social media, but also you came to a Zoom, and this wasn't a recorded Zoom. So this was like back, like, again, you want to talk, we're throwing it back here. You came to a Zoom, and I don't think you had Twitter yet, or was it you had Twitter, you didn't have Instagram, or was it vice versa? There was something.
Yes.
Okay,
I did have Twitter.
Okay. And I remember we came up with a brilliant username for you.
Yes, I do remember that. So I knew like I wanted like Kevin, something with Kevin Craven, but I didn't know how to, I didn't know Twitter at all.
Yeah.
And you like helped me.
Well, and it was the thing that I think is so cool about it is because the gods of Scream in certain respects are Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven, and we kind of like morphed, you know, we used your name and like kind of, you know, it just assembled, you know, their names in a way. So I thought that was just so cool, and that always like that always stuck out to me as a memory. Like people like, so I know we're like on almost five years of the podcast now, but like back in like year 2, which is when this interaction occurred. When the Patreon first started, we didn't record the Zoom Hangouts. So like the Zoom Hangouts were something new, actually, you know, in terms of being like turning the monthly Zoom into podcast recording. Before, we would just come to the Zoom and hang out, and I would go around and we would just get to know each other and just hang out for an hour and a half. So that's when like stuff like this happened. And like, so, I mean, the people who have been with the podcast from the beginning, like Kevin, I mean, like we're very bonded because of like times like those, you know, living through some bad times with, you know, the news in 2023, and now kind of, you know, going through so many iterations. It's crazy to me to think that there will be 3 Scream movies by this time next year that have come out in this decade, in the last 5 years. Isn't that wild?
That is wild. And we're so lucky to be here, you know, during these times of more Scream movies.
So, you know, what was your experience? And I guess this kind of ties into your Scream story, but like, you know, it's just, you know, the way that, so you saw Scream 3 in theaters. So that means you would have been a fan of 1 and 2 in the 90s as they were coming out, correct?
Ryan, I was obsessed with 1 and 2 when 3 came out.
Well, let's just cut to the chase here. What is your Scream story, Kevin?
Okay, so I'll keep it brief. So I think I was 8 years old, and I saw it in 1997. You know, the first one was released in December 96. So I went to my friend's house, and his mother would always buy movies on black market, is what we call it, where someone would film it illegally in the theater. And she would buy them, and she bought Scream. And it was very clear. And so me and my friend were watching, and I knew nothing about it. I saw Drew. I didn't even know who Drew was when I was 8. And so I saw her, and I was just like, the first scene, I was just blown away. But then meeting Sidney, meeting Tatum, meeting Gale, my friend, he wasn't gay. I was very gay. And it struck something in me that like the fight, seeing Tatum fight, seeing Sidney fight, it just made me want to fight. You know, not physically, but like just fight for myself. And, you know, being this poor, closeted black kid in Baltimore, it really just sparked something in me, and seeing all these badass women. And so we watched it, and I wanted to watch it again, but his mother didn't have the tape anymore. So we were living near a mall at the time, and it had this video store called Sam Goody, and they sold tapes and CDs. And again, I was very poor. So I tried to steal Scream as a child. I went to the mall with my brother, my older brother, and I had these big shorts on. And I put the VHS tape in my pocket. And I tried to walk out the store, but it had a sensor on it. And so the woman, she's like, empty your pockets. And then I pull out this big ass VHS tape. And she's like, don't come back here no more. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I had no idea I was going to get caught. But I needed to watch it again.
So how did there has to be a happy ending to this story. When did you get to watch Scream again?
So I ended up, so my mother rented it on pay-per-view because I was raving about it, and we watched it again. She was so thrown off by the opening scene and was just so surprised that Casey was like talking to this man and she didn't know who he was. And it kind of worried her how much I liked it. I felt like she was afraid that I was going to grow up to be Billy and Stu, but little did she know I wanted to be Sidney and Tatum and Gail. So,
Kevin, my heart is on fire. I can't contain myself right now. I'm like discombobulated because I'm so moved by this Scream story. This is one of my favorite Scream stories in a long time. First, like, I want to just, before we get into the deep stuff, I have a funny story to share. I don't know if you've, I'm sure if you listen to the podcast, you've heard my sister before.
Yes.
She's kind of a dumb jock and we love her. But like also she's 2 years younger than me. So we're very close. And growing up, we were very close. So, she watched what I watched. Like I dictated, and she just went along for the ride. Her friends watched what I watched. So we would watch, Scream marathons. We would watch the Sarah Michelle Gellar movies, whatever. So I was the bad brother. I was, I showed her and her friends Cruel Intentions when they were in elementary school. I had no business doing that. And we were going through a Cruel Intentions phase, and we were at a mall, and we were at a DVD store, and there was like this poster, like this 9x12 poster of Cruel Intentions, and I really, really wanted it, but I didn't have. My mom wasn't with us; it was just us, and like I didn't have money, but and Abby tried stealing it, and she put it in her coat, and she got caught as well. But the guy was a little nicer. He didn't say "Don't come back here," but we were at a mall that we weren't typically at. Like we were there with a friend of my mom, so it was like an hour away from the house. We've never been there before, and I don't know what possessed her to do this, other than she was just trying to steal it for her brother who loved this movie. And not that this is such a weird turn, right, to be talking about stuff like this, but so I feel you in some respect.
I love that she tried to do that for you.
I know. And like, because Cruel Intentions was one of our movies, that like, and I, in fact, like I remember she had to watch Cruel Intentions. She was on the Cruel Intentions podcast last year.
Nice.
And I gave her I was still in school at the time, so I didn't have time to sit down and watch it with her. So I gave it to her to watch, and she said that it was really sad to watch Cruel Intentions by herself and not with me. So I just, anyways, tangent aside. But
I love that.
Your story about the girl power in Scream is so cool because I think that's something I felt inside. And the thing is, like, whenever I was watching Scream, whenever I was growing up, and this kind of applies to other things like Buffy and like the Sarah Michelle Gellar movies, right? Or I Know She Did Last Summer. But specifically with Scream and Sidney and Gail, and I guess all of the female characters like Tatum, whatever. But there is something about the women in Scream that speaks to the soul of a gay guy, or even just like I can't speak for lesbians or other people in the LGBT or women, but I think that there's something about just the representation in Scream that it's not it doesn't feel performative. It feels natural, but yet within the natural representation of female empowerment, it's so deep and so cutting and so human, and it really affects you. And when within the prism and the structure of Scream, of like the formula of the whodunit, who's betraying me, I think that there's something just very visceral about Sidney and Gail as characters that we can latch onto. And I certainly, the way that you described it, I was like, oh wow, that was my experience. Like back then, I was just watching these as movies. I didn't realize that Scream was almost imprinting on me kind of like my worldview, or what would become my worldview about how badass women are,
Right. Yeah. It really does just, after the credits roll, it sticks with you. And I didn't expect that at all, but I'm glad that it did.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, Kevin, before we get to our main topic here, let us do the speed round questions, which again, it's so funny to me. Like, you've been around for so long, but I don't know your answers to these questions. So let's do it. Okay. So Sidney, Gail, or Ty?
Oh my God. Ty for sure.
Right answer. I'm just teasing. So, okay. Sam or Tara?
Sam.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dewey or Chad?
Definitely Dewey.
Okay. Definitely Dewey.
Definitely. I love
Point.
Chad. Don't get me wrong. But I'm sorry. I want to, I love Chad, but it's Dewey. Come on,
All right. So favorite movie buff? This can be anybody from any of the 6 movies.
Okay. So again, the girls are going to eat me up again for this answer, but I'm going to have to go with Mindy.
Go for it. I mean, like, you know what? Like, I'm actually really excited to see Mindy in Scream 7. So.
Yeah. Mindy, and even after Mindy, if I had to choose again, it would be after Mindy, it would be Randy and then Kirby. Kirby never okay. Yeah. Anyway, that would be the order, but I am happy to see Mindy again. And even though I love her, I can admit that she could have been better written,
Okay. Yeah.
But I do love her.
Well, and the thing is, like, if there was a world where Scream 6 didn't exist, I would be a Mindy fan. Like, I loved Mindy in Scream 5. And maybe we've all been too hard on Mindy in Scream 6. I don't know. I'm really looking forward to see what Mindy is up to in Scream 7. And the biggest thing is, like, the reason I looked inward and I was like, ooh, maybe I like Mindy more than I thought I did because of Scream 6, is like, I was thinking about, like, do you really want a new character in the Isabel May friend group, who is suddenly this movie buff who's going to give us the roles? Like, no, I want Mindy. You know what I mean? What do you think?
I agree. If there's going to be another movie buff, why not just bring one back that we're already familiar with?
Exactly. So, and allegedly, Jasmine Savoy has talked about this often, in interviews, that Kevin, his favorite character from the new movies is Mindy. So, if that exists, if that's a real thing, then I want to see what Kevin can do with her. So, yeah. Okay, Kevin, favorite killer?
Oh, I hate to be a basic gay, but it's gonna have to be Mrs. Loomis.
So my brain is so, like, weirdly wired after going to the 90s con last week.
Yeah.
Because when you started saying, I don't mean to be a basic gay, I was thinking, oh, he's going to pick Skeet Ulrich because he is so beautiful in real life. But I was like, oh, Mrs. Loomis, duh. So
I love her. Laurie Metcalf was amazing. She was so committed.
So who's your next favorite after her?
My next favorite after her, wow, I did not think about that. That's throwing me off a little bit. Okay, so I would probably say Roman.
Oh my gosh, love it. I figured you would. That's why I did it. It was like 2, Mrs. Loomis, 3, you're ranking this 2, 3. He's going to pick Roman. All right. Favorite opening and favorite finale?
Okay, so my favorite opening is Jada Pinkett. That was just such a brilliant opening. It was so brilliant. Like, having someone killed in the movie theater while it's full of people wearing ghost face masks. I don't know if that was Wes or Kevin, but it was brilliant. Just such a good job, and I was a huge Jada fan. I listen, despite what's happening with her, I still do love her. But I was a big fan of her. She did, like, Set It Off and A Different World back in the day. And so seeing her in Scream 2, I lost it. But I just thought that was such a well done opening. My favorite ending is, it's going to have to be Scream 2 because, for the reason that just seeing Sidney and Gail come together in a way that they didn't in the first one. Yes, they ended together in Scream 1, but this time they were leveled up. They were leveled up and they were like, look, we're going to fuck some shit up. The way that they both shot Mickey up, it was just so badass. I loved it.
I don't think kids today, not to be like the grandpa, but, like, I don't think kids today recognize, like, how amazing that the double shoot of, like, Sidney and Gail having the guns standing over Mrs. Loomis's body with Cotton behind them, and for Mickey to pop up and them both to just, go ham with him. How empowering that was. Like, how, like, having 2 women who frankly don't like each other, who don't agree on much, who have survived, who have this weird trauma bond situation going on, and who have both, like, we've seen them now live through two horrific massacres together, and they get to kind of like get that moment of like, togetherness at the end. It's so cool. And again, like speaking to the episode you were on back in the day, the complex relationship between Sidney and Gail. I mean, I would never stop doing a version of that episode. Like, I'm going to do an episode like that after Scream 7, because we don't know what's going to happen with them in Scream 7. So, but I love that moment as well.
Me too. It was so well done.
Well, so let's go back to the opening of Scream 2, because there's so many things about that opening that are so cool, right? You have what you described, like the idea and just the concept of going to the movies, because the movies are about movies. Like the Scream 1 was all about the horror movies, right? So putting us in the movie theater, one, but then two, all of the costumes. So everyone, literally anyone and everyone could be doing this. Three, we're seeing Casey Becker, this legendary moment in horror history being replayed in front of us in a meta way. And then, on top of that too, you also have the commentary of what Jada Pinkett is saying to her boyfriend, how she's acting, how she's feeling, not wanting to be there, feeling uncomfortable. And then the big crescendo, which is nobody believes her when she's being attacked and when she's dying.
It's so loaded. It's so loaded. Just her whole commentary on white girls being cut up in movies and how, there's no Black representation in horror movies, and she ends up being in a horror movie. And I feel like a lot of people are over the stab concept, but if it ever comes back, if it does come back in any way in Scream 7, I hope we can at some point see Maureen.
Oh my god,
theater. That would be so
I love that. Oh my god, we could totally do that. Like, there should be I know. So let's just talk about this for a second. Like, stab, I get, by the time Scream 5 came around, right, when having like Scream 3, which is very stab heavy, then to go to Scream 4, which again is very stab heavy. We literally, the opening is several stab movies, right? Then to Scream 5, where it's the whole thing is about the toxic fans of stab. I understand the exhaustion with it, but again, like, I don't know. I love stab. I'm a Scream 3 guy. Like, I love the idea of stab and what it does with the franchise. I think that I would like for it to make a comeback. Maybe not, in Scream 7, but I do think that there is future with stab. And I want stab to be set right, because I feel like Scream 6, not to, dig on it, but like, I think Scream 6 and frankly 5 kind of messed it up in some ways. Like, for instance, why was there no stab movie about Jill? Was there a stab movie about Jill? We don't know, because like it's confusing the way that Scream 5 tells the story. So I don't know, I would like for stab to make a comeback, and who knows? I think involving Sidney's kids would be an interesting thing down the road too with stab. So, we'll see.
Agree. Yeah, I agree. They should bring it back.
All right. So what is your all-time favorite scene?
Oh my God, Ryan, I didn't think about that. Oh, wow. Okay. So off the dome, I'm going to say the Sidney versus Roman face-off. It's so deep, and every time I rewatch Scream 3 or any of them really, it's like I'm watching it for the first time. I'm rewinding over and over. He takes his mask off. She has no idea who he is. He explains who she is. He shows her the video of their mother. It's hitting her deep. It's really hitting her. And then I felt like she was just so much more connected to, obviously to this killer, but I don't know. I felt like she was, I don't know. I can't word it properly, but just the back and forth and how she was really fed up, and she's like, take some fucking responsibility. It was so good. I'm so tired of people sleeping on Scream 3. Like, people need to wake up and stop sleeping on Scream 3.
Well, it's funny because I don't feel, as somebody who felt as though Scream 3 was like, maligned for many years and unfairly treated and unfairly looked down upon. I don't feel that sense of that same sense anymore. I think that the tide has shifted. I think people have looked back on it. I think it's aged well. And I think not having Nev in 6 also aids that even just a little bit more in terms of like missing Sidney and like realizing, oh my God, this is when Sidney was arguably at her best. So I love that, and I love that that's your favorite scene because it's also mine. So there you go.
Oh,
So okay, favorite kill or death throughout the franchise?
My favorite of all time is always going to go to Tatum.
Okay.
I just thought that that was such a creative way for her to die. You know, when have you seen that? You know, she's trying to escape through a doggy door, but she kicked Billy or Stu's ass before doing it. You know, it was just so good. It really did. Like, it aligned with her character because Tatum was a badass the whole movie. And so she's gonna die. She can't just go out, you know, like, I don't know, like Olivia, you know, she has to put it, you know, she has to fight.
Yeah. I like that. And also, you know, Tatum, I think, in my opinion, is kind of like, I think she deserves a renaissance, especially if like Isabel May, if her name is Tatum. You know, I think it's so cool. I think it's a nice reference, but it's so cool to me how Tatum is such a popular character and Rose McGowan like left such an impression as an actor that she, you know, she's only in 1 hour of the movie. Not even that, right? In terms of like, you know, the 6 movies. And yet she is such a dynamic presence that just lives in the world and minds of Scream. And it's just like, wow, Rose really did her job. Like, in fact, I think that Rose, like, I think Kevin wrote a good character, but I think what Rose brought to the character made her distinctively Tatum, if that makes sense.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I get that.
So, okay, a couple more. Favorite supporting role throughout the franchise?
Favorite supporting role? That's not including any of the trio.
Right. So take the trio and Carpenters out. Anybody else?
So I think I'm gonna have to say Tatum. You know, her small part in Scream 1 really does just live on with you. And I thought that she was well written. And I think that Rose just did such a great job at bringing Tatum to life. And she's Dewey's sister. So, you know, she's always going to be a big part of the story.
Yeah.
Because Dewey lived for so long.
That's true. That's true. Just out of curiosity, what's your position on Dewey's death? Yay or nay?
I don't mind that he died, but I think it was Cassie who was talking about this a couple episodes ago, where it was the way he died. Why did he have to end up in a trailer? Why did he have to be an alcoholic? You know, why did him and Gail have to not be together? You know, I'm not so upset that he died, but it's the way that he was handled in 5.
Right. Okay. So yay or nay on the TV series? Have you watched it?
I've never seen one episode.
Okay, good enough. We don't yeah. Okay. So what is your favorite thing about Scream?
My favorite thing about Scream, I guess I just love the whodunit of it all. You know, someone that you had sex with or someone that you went to the movies with could be the same person going around killing people, and you just don't know. And just that excitement of trying to figure out who it is, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I like it. All right. I have a question. I feel awkward asking this question to everybody, but you know, you're somebody who has been with me for the long haul. So I want to know, what is your favorite thing about the podcast, or do you have a favorite memory about the podcast, or what sticks out to you as like, you know, a moment for for you with the podcast?
Oh man, Ryan, just the fact that there is a Scream podcast, first of all, but I will say that there was a moment I cried listening to the podcast, and it was when it was one of the Screams that were written by, I forget the author's name.
Joey Valisi.
Joey, yes. It was it Scream 7?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I cried every time I listened to that too. So
yeah, it was when Sam died, and I cried. I mean, you were reading it so well, and I was just so connected to it, the way you were narrating. But it was at the end where I forget exactly what happened, but it was Sydney and her daughters, and I think like they were in their room, or one of them was in their room or something. And it was just so well done.
How that goes down is, so Sam dies in the finale. Like, they kill Christina, who is the mom, and Sam kills her, and Sam's been getting stabbed throughout the finale, and then Sam kind of dies while Sydney's holding her, and Gail's there too, and then Sydney holds her hand as she's dying, and then we go to a montage, and it ends with Sydney like reading to her daughters. She gets up to close the door, and she flashes, and she sees Sam and Tara laying on the bed, not her daughters, and then she flashes back and then closes the door. That's how it ends. Episode 112, everybody go listen. I love that script so much.
So good.
But thank you. I love that.
Me too.
So, all right, Kevin, thank you for that speed round. That was very fun. So let's now move into the topic that you suggested for tonight. So this is a very fun topic. So like, I love that. Like, I love that I kind of got this out of you because it's not something that was front of mind for me. But we are going to be talking about Sidney's love life. So, or about her relationships that she's had in the film so far. And then possibly what's up with Mark, and this is a very fraught topic because of the fact, I mean, for several reasons, right? But like specifically, Patrick Dempsey did not return. So we don't have the Mark that we thought we were getting is not the Mark that we're going to get. So just to recount, Sidney has been in the following relationships. In Scream 1, Billy Loomis. Scream 2, Derek. Scream 3, there was a flirtation, there was a connection with Mark Kincaid, and there was an illusion that they could go on to be in a relationship down the road. Mm-hmm. And then Scream 4, she had no one that we know of, but like based on the timeline, she was probably dating Mark or Mark was involved somehow. And then Scream 5, we knew that she was married to a Mark and had kids, and specifically daughters. We don't know, we didn't know how many. It was all left very vague, which So, okay. And now here we are. We all thought it was Mark Kincaid because Radio Silence went on this podcast, literally this podcast, and to all of the magazines and said that it was Mark Kincaid. It didn't pan out that way. She's now married to Mark Evans, or she has been married to Mark Evans, who is played by Joel McHale. So that is TBA. But Kevin, so first of all, why did you want to talk about this? What was the impetus, or what got you thinking about this?
Seeing that it's not going to be Mark Kincaid in 7, I really do wonder what that dynamic will be. And then I was just thinking about all of Sidney's past lovers and how different they were. I mean, it wasn't like, it was 3 of them, but still, they were all very different.
Well, they are different. And like I think it's so brilliant what they do with Sidney's relationships. Specifically the contrast, specifically comparing like Billy and Derek and then Derek and Kincaid, I think like those, and like how all 3 of them kind of symbolize something to her in the trilogy. And again, it's an unspoken thing because like back in the 90s, there was an emphasis on if you had a female lead, she did have a romantic relationship. But I don't think Scream plays it that way. Like I never think of Scream as like the Sidney Prescott relationship drama. Her boyfriend is always kind of like an appendage of her as the central figure, which I think is cool. Even in Scream 1, where, Billy being the boyfriend and being the killer, that's so important to the plot. But it never feels misogynistic, or it never feels sexist. It never feels like, this is just the teenage girl and her boyfriend, and of course she's obsessed with boys. Like that's not how Scream plays at all. In fact, I think Sidney in Scream 1, you could say that she's most consumed by her mother, of course, and like the trauma from her mom. And Billy is so secondary to her. And I think that's a big problem in their relationship. It's so weird. Like I was thinking about it today. I was trying to think about how we could talk about them. And for Billy Loomis, like, and Sidney, I just don't see how they are a match at all. And it's hard because Sidney is traumatized whenever we see her in the relationship with Billy. So we don't know what their relationship was like before. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on Sidney and Billy as a couple?
So this is going to be very unpopular, but rewatching their first interaction when he snuck through her window, one of the first things he said was, 2 years ago, things were hot and heavy between us. Now, if you are in that 2 years ago, we're 2 years ago, Maureen doesn't die until a year later. So right. Why weren't they hot and heavy for 2 whole years? To me, Sidney was never like, head over heels for Billy.
Yeah.
And, it was kind of him, he snuck through a window, and it was kind of him pressuring her to have sex. I just never really, and I don't think he was really like super into her either. I just think he just wanted to fuck.
Well, and he did, because look at, we have Sam Carpenter, right? We have the baby child to Christina. And I think that's like, that says something about their relationship. Like, I don't see, like, whenever I look at Sidney and Derek, even though I think that they aren't, I don't think Derek is the right guy for her. I think I see the connection, and I see why she would be interested in him and he would be interested in her. I don't get that with Billy and Sidney. I think there is, I don't know. I mean, I think that they're together out of like a weird trauma bond. And obviously he's preying on her because he wants to kill her and get revenge on her and validation for him and his mother leaving and everything. But even before then, it feels like they're just a very unhappy couple. And I think that you make a good point thinking about the backstory and what it was like before then. Like, I think that on some level they're into each other, but it's probably very shallow. And then you add in all the trauma on top of it. I don't know. They just, his personality and her personality, they don't click. And like the scene in the hallway, for instance, I think is such a good representation of their relationship because he's so insensitive about her trauma and about her feelings. And in some way, maybe Sidney shouldn't have been with anybody in high school at that time if she had such horrible. And honestly, I think that, and I'm going to let you talk after this. I feel like in some ways, every action Sidney has with Billy in Scream 1, she's repelling him away. Like you can tell she almost doesn't want to be in a relationship with him or even anybody because she just can't be in a relationship with him. But I almost feel like she feels like pressured into it or suckered into it. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I agree. I do think she was pressured into it. And a lot of that pressure came from him. But yeah, I didn't feel the chemistry. The moment in the hallway at the school was definitely another one. He was not sensitive to what she was dealing with. It was always about him. And to me, Sidney, after her first Ghostface interaction, she knew he was the killer. At the police station, she was just like eyeing him. Even after they had sex, she was like, so who'd you call? Like she knew it was him.
Well, and that's the thing. So, a really cool scene of Dan Kimball's acting and like their relationship and their dynamic is the scene in the bedroom before they have sex. And I always wonder what is going through her mind here. Like, is she trying to convince herself of the relationship? Is she trying to overcompensate? Like, is she believing that, she is the problem about, that her trauma is somehow something wrong? There's something wrong with her. And that by having sex with him, it will make her trauma go away by giving him what he wants or what she thinks that he wants, or, you know what I mean? Or what she owes him, or, what her role is in society. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I definitely feel like she was overcompensating in ways and perhaps or possibly trying to convince herself that he's not bad. He's not a bad person, that, that she can be sexual, that, yeah, I think a lot of it was her trying to convince herself.
Mm-hmm. And, even like in those interactions, like, I don't know, Sidney has a very cutesy sense of humor. And we don't really get to see it that often. I think we get to see it most in Scream 2, but she has a very like quirky way of speaking in terms of her personality whenever she is in a happy mood. And I just, again, we see it in hints of it in Scream 1, and it just doesn't match up with the Billy Loomis that I know, that we see, like the guy who's kind of intimidating and kind of creepy and very like, brooding, it's just, I don't, I just don't think that they were ever meant to be, even if he wasn't trying to kill her. Like, let's just say Billy wasn't the killer and he died in the bedroom there, before she gets chased. Like, I think that Sidney could have moved on from that pretty easily. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think so too. If he wasn't the killer, it still they wouldn't have matched, really. I don't think, it never came off that way. Their chemistry never gave, we are supposed to be together. And,
there's something, even though that Billy was wrong for her and like there is a personality clash, I think that it still doesn't take away from the fact that she was trauma bonded to him in a way, and that she did overcompensate for him, and that he was a really important person in her life for the worst things, in terms of, this is the first guy she had sex with. This is the relationship that she was in for a long time in her teenage years, when these horrible things were happening to her even before Ghostface, Maureen's death, the trial, blah, blah, blah. And so Billy will always be something very weird to her, and very unique to her, which is again, why I feel like they could have gone farther with the Sam and Sidney dynamic in Scream 5. And maybe this was part of the original Scream 7 when Sam was supposed to be in it. But I think that there was so much untapped potential between Sidney and Sam as it relates to Billy.
Yeah, they could have dove into that a lot more.
Kevin Williamson has talked about this idea that he had, like, if Scream 4 would have been successful and done the trilogy, that he would have gone on to have like Sidney, the last story in his mind back then would have been like Sidney falls in love and gets married, and the murders start happening again, and she questions, like, is this happening again? Is it my husband? And it turned out that it wasn't, and that she got to live happily ever after, and she was free from the curse of Billy Loomis, which I think is a nice story and would have been cute. But I think that I'm happy for Sidney that she was able to move on from everything that Billy did to her here, if that makes sense, and even into Scream 2. So
yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's good to just see that she was able to move on and find someone else.
So let's talk about Derek. So this is a year and a half, 2 years later. She's dating Derek Feldman from at Windsor College, pre-med. And why don't you kick us off, and then I'll chime in.
Okay, Ryan. Derek is just like, Derek was all over Sidney, and I mean that in the best way. Like, it wasn't toxic. Like the moment where she just found out about Maureen and her boyfriend in the movie theater, and then she's talking to Randy, and you see Derek in the background like hop over the rail, and he runs up to her. He's like, "I've been looking all over for you." Like, he was all over her. And again, it wasn't in a toxic way. I just love that he adored her so much. And when he kissed her in front of Randy, he was really just like, you could see how into her he was. And of course, the cafeteria, "I think I love you." Like, listen, if a man is going to do that in front of everybody in front of me, we are together forever. It was just so sweet. And you can see how crushed he was when she said that she needed some distance. But I do think that she really liked him. I just feel like she couldn't allow herself to open up the way a normal person would have. Her life was no longer normal, and moving on and finding love was not going to look the same, that it would for anyone else. But I just really, Derek was, I love Derek. I do. I really just love them together. And at the same time, I do love the fact that they killed him off, because we need those stakes.
We need the stakes. We need the emotion. We need the power. We need the sadness for, to fuel the rest of the story. Like, and that's, again, my issue with Scream 6 is like not killing anybody off. Like, had they gone through and had the Sam and Tara final chapter of that trilogy with Scream 7, I think that there was lacking stakes for there not to have been a death, whether it had been Tara, whether it had been Sam, whether it had been Chad or Mindy. We needed more for that. So
I think Tara should have died in 5, but that's another story. I think she should have been the opening kill. But anyway, that's another story.
Well, Ashley Summers, you're listening, creative producer, please put that on the schedule and tag Kevin. We're going to do that in a couple of months. So there you go.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Okay. So with Derek, it's hard because in a lot of ways, he is the anti-Billy. Like, even just the way that you described him, he is so affectionate and he's so dedicated and so warm to her. He is everything that Billy wasn't. And Billy was, I think, he was handsy and PDA, but he wasn't warm to her. He wasn't caring towards her in the same way that Derek is. Derek is just like a big, lovable teddy bear. He is like the ideal, quintessential, like football player type of boyfriend you want, and with an amazing personality to boot, right?
Yeah.
And yet, the tragedy of Sidney and Derek is, and the other thing is, I actually think that they are in sync when it comes to their personalities. Like, at the frat at the Greek party, whenever Cece dies, and they're sitting there talking and making jokes, and they're laughing right before the sisters come out and say, "Guys, somebody just died. Hurry!" There is genuine chemistry there. There is a genuine spark there. And I think that like Sidney, I think they both really, really like each other. But there's a tragedy here because Sidney has a very specific kind of trauma, which is, my boyfriend tried to kill me and my boyfriend killed my mom. The minute that Mickey starts kind of puts the seed of doubt in her mind about him, it can never work. No matter how good of a guy Derek is, no matter how much Sidney tried, I don't think it could work. And this also kind of dovetails with something else, which is the fact that, even though Derek wants to understand and wants to be there for her, I don't think that Derek... No, I don't think that it's possible for Derek. He doesn't have the tools. He's not equipped to deal with what Sidney went through and what's the darkness that's inside her. And that's the fundamental flaw in this relationship that probably was doomed forever, and that's why Sidney pushed him away. That's why, Sidney was suspicious of him, even though he didn't deserve it. That's why Sidney doubted him right before he died. It's just that he could never understand her in the way that she needed to be understood based on the darkness of Woodsboro, with Maureen's death, with the trial, and with Billy Loomis.
Yeah, I agree. He was very lighthearted, and he really wasn't about that life. Sydney has that darkness in her, inevitably. And Derek, just as much as he loved her, I don't think that he could understand that she just wasn't for him.
And so, I mean, his death is so impactful because of this, right? Because of everything that we just kind of talked about with him. Like, he is in some way the Prince Charming, the perfect guy. And yet it can't work because Sidney she hasn't reached her trilogy arc yet. She hasn't opened the gates and freed herself from the trauma. But also, I feel like Derek kind of grew up a very all-American boy type, in terms of he didn't have anything that Sidney had in terms of the heaviness, So I just feel like it wasn't meant to be, despite, and I think it's just also, for me, I feel like there's a lesson in there about life. It's not always about the person who is the hottest, or the person who you laugh the most with. There are so many other factors. It's about timing. It's about someone else's past and your past, and like understanding each other. And I don't think that Derek could understand Sidney in the way that she needed to be understood. And that's not his fault. It's just the way that it is.
That's the way it is. That was so well said. He, as much as he wanted to, you could see he wanted to connect with her. They were just two very different people.
And maybe if the murders didn't happen, but as soon as the murder started happening again and Sidney was targeted, I think, the emotions that she was going through and what was going on in her head, it just would have prevented any future, there. So, and I agree with you. The cafeteria scene is such it's funny because, like, to think about the world before Scream 5 and 6, the cafeteria scene used to be talked about as one of the worst scenes in Scream. Just, it was so cheesy and it was this, but I love it. I think it's great character development for,
I love it.
But also it sets up the finale so well, right? In terms of Mickey messing with her in the letters and,
I agree.
When Sidney loses Derek, and when she loses Randy, but specifically Derek, there's a regret in her. There's a sadness in her that she can't shake off, which is why she wears his letters, for Scream 3.
So sweet. Love it. She needs those letters. Like, we need to, she's married now, but it would be nice to just see her still, in possession of the letters.
Yes. And like, it's so cool because the letters and Derek, in a way, act as a weapon for her, because she uses them to fling Mickey to like really get the fight going. And
like, how smart was that? That's why that's my favorite ending. It's just so well done.
And so in a way, even though it didn't work out with Derek, he was with her, and he helped her.
Ryan.
So
that is so sweet. I love that.
All right, let's move on now to Kincaid. And now this is really hard because, like, I've always had this moment in this analysis of Kincaid and Derek side by side. And it was always like Kincaid was the answer to Derek, because the way I see Kincaid is so Derek's fundamental flaw with Sidney is that he couldn't understand the darkness of Sidney's past because he doesn't have that. Kincaid is the opposite, where he does have that dark past with whatever childhood trauma he grew up with that was alluded to. His job, as a detective investigator in Los Angeles and on the murder beat, right? So, and like, he has the movie connection of it all too. So he has he has a different palette and a different life experience that I think really matches with Sidney. And I think that Sidney opens up to him in a way that she couldn't even open up to Derek, being in a full-time relationship with him. And she can talk about things with him, even in their short time, as she is still suspicious of him as a suspect, in the scheme of things. So it makes me, the seeds that are planted in Scream 3 with Kincaid, they are so ripe for a great long-term marriage. And it's sad that we were led to believe this about him, that he would be the Mark that Sidney's married to, and then it didn't pay off. Because Scream 3, it never beats you over the head with the idea that they're going to be a couple, but that's the brilliant thing about it. And that's what it taught me something about love and romance, is that, love and romance and partnership, it comes from that connection, and that and those conversations and the understanding of each other. Like Sidney can understand Kincaid's past while he can understand hers, and they're both curious about each other's pasts. And that's what makes a good partnership in some respects, or at least a good relationship. So, Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. It was very subtle, Sidney and Kincaid's connection in 3. And I really do appreciate that. There were some really little subtle moments. For example, when Sidney came out of hiding and Kincaid first saw her. When she first came in and Dewey and Gail were there, and he kind of gave her this look like Patrick was acting. He was acting, okay? But it was very subtle. It wasn't like, oh, I love this girl's hot. It wasn't like that. It was very subtle. Like you could see that something was there. And as the movie goes on, you see, okay, maybe they do have something. But I really did just notice how he just kind of gave her this look. And there was something else that I noticed after she was chased on the Stab 3 set in the house, and Dewey ran over, and then he ran over to her, and they both picked her up. And he was kind of looking at her like he wanted to comfort her, but then Dewey took her away, and he kind of like gave Dewey a look. So I thought that was just really the small details.
He's very protective of her, like even like, in that moment, and taking her to the station. Like there's a lot of subtlety that Patrick Dempsey does with his acting, interacting with Nev, but also while Nev is a part of the scene and he's just around her, that gives clues that he's interested in her, but also there's a human connection there. And he is a good guy despite being a suspect, so he's playing both things, and so it can be read in both ways. But the subtlety is what makes it so good, and the fact that like they set up, even though that she didn't end up with him, they set it up that here is a potential long-term match for Sidney after she works through her stuff. And they just pivot it, they just volley it up for the potential down the road, which I think is brilliant. Like it doesn't focus on Kincaid and beat us over the head with, this is the, Beauty and the Beast, Titanic love story. This is just an adult thing that adults deal with, and an adult connection. I know, Kevin.
Yes, and I love that it wasn't so in your face, it was just very subtle, just allowing the story to breathe, and you can take it where you want to take it. But Kincaid, he was clearly very fond of Sidney. Like the way he looked at her at the police station when it was just them two, like the way he was looking at her, like if a guy looks at me like that, it's a wrap. We go together, like you cannot be. He was just acting really well. You could see that he was fond of Sidney. He was just really connecting with her. Like you said, their dark, the darkness that they have within them, they connected on that. And that's why I do feel like that they would have been so good for each other. It was just, you really felt the chemistry. They were both acting.
Well, and I think that Kincaid respects Sidney, and I think that this is like the first time. I think Derek respected her, but he had too much of a puppy, college boy, young boy love that overstepped all that. Whereas I think Kincaid, you feel the respect for her in especially that scene. Like it's one of my favorite scenes of all time. Like the scene in the police station where it's just them talking before he leaves. One of the best scenes ever in terms of just like, because we don't really know him, but we get enough where it's interesting and we see why they understand each other. And there's so much that Sidney divulges in that. And one other subtle thing is, he tries to save her in the finale. He literally twice, right? He takes the knife to the shoulder, jumps in front of her when the killer comes out, and while they're still like in the living room, and then when they're in the screening room, he despite being stabbed, he is like getting up, unlocking the door with the tweezers and coming in to try to help her more than Gail and Dewey are. And he's more successful than Gail and Dewey are. That's something. I don't know.
I agree. He was willing to fight for her, and it was beyond just him doing his job. It was because it was Sidney who was in danger, so I feel like that played a bigger part in him wanting to not only catch the killer, but just to protect her,
And again, even though they didn't end up together, I think that he's really significant and pivotal because he represents the potential of love down the road as Sidney finds her peace. And that's what's so beautiful about it. And I think that can still be appreciated about Scream 3, even though they didn't end up together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my God. I keep getting chills. I'm like a very emotional person. So every time you're talking, I'm like, oh my God, that's so true. It's just really, they had some really warm moments, I think. It was really.
And because Sidney is such a dark person, I think that it's good for her to have been able to connect romantically with somebody who is also kind of has darkness in their life. And here's a good segue to talk about Mark Evans is, while I think it was good for Sidney to have a connection like that, where she can tap into her darkness and explore that part of who she is with somebody who has also a little bit of darkness in them. Maybe a good, a good consequence of Patrick Dempsey not coming back is the fact that she is going to be married to somebody who has the potential to not be that dark, heavy presence. Maybe it's good for Sidney to be with someone who, like Joel McHale, just as an actor, we know him from comedic roles and lighthearted roles. So we can surmise that he'll probably be playing that type in when he plays Mark. So, in some ways, it's probably better and healthier for Sidney to be with more of a fun dad, low key jokester kind of guy, as opposed to the brooding Kincaid who has all of this, murder in his life, right?
Yeah, I mean, even though it would have been nice to see Kincaid and Sidney unpack that darkness or some of that darkness, what was left of that darkness together, that would have been nice. I do agree. I think having a good contrast is good for Sidney.
And there's so many things about Mark Evans, and I think also not making him Kincaid takes the pressure off a little bit in terms of I think that I think that Mark Evans is going to die. What do you think? Do you think he's going to live or die?
So I think that Evans is going to die. Mm-hmm. Had it been Kincaid, I think it would have been a different story. I don't think they would have killed off Kincaid, but I do agree with you. I do think they will kill off Evans. I think it'll be a good amount of stakes by having him killed off, and we don't have a connection to him. Not to say that they couldn't have killed Kincaid off because we were connected to him, but I feel like there would have been more pressure not to kill Kincaid off. I think, now that we have this different actor, Joel, who is playing Evans, it'll be easier to kill him off.
Well, and also the nice thing about him is, and I say this as literally the biggest Mark Kincaid fan in the world, is that there with Mark Evans, there is a blank slate, in terms of, and they can do anything with Mark Evans. They can develop Sidney and her relationship with him in whatever way possible. I think that Mark Evans would be a good contrast to her as a parent. Whereas Mark Kincaid, I feel like he and Sidney would be the same kind of parent. I think Mark Evans would be a different kind of parent than Sidney is. And I think that he could bring out a different side in her, a good everyday side as she's a mom, right? So I think that there are many cool things that they can do. Where with Kincaid, we would have all these expectations. Now we don't have, we don't have any reasonable expectations here. Because he's a new character.
Yeah, so there's nothing that we're expecting from him. Whatever we get is all new because we don't know this character. So yeah, they can go in a lot of different directions. Now I have to say that I was very disappointed and very sad when we got the news that Dempsey wouldn't be returning. Mm-hmm. But it was something you said on an episode that kind of shifted my perspective. And I forget exactly what it was, but it made me more excited for Scream 7 again. And I forget what you said. I wish, oh my God, I was supposed to go over it again, but I don't remember. But I am back in a place of excitement for Scream 7 and having, Evans, replace Kincaid.
Well, and the thing is, it's because we're getting, 2-3 new characters in Sidney's daughters. I think that it's actually a good thing that we can know the daughters and know the dad without knowing the dad first. I think there's with Kincaid, there would have also been so much pressure on, in some ways, I think about it, let's just say Mark Kincaid does die. Let's just say he dies in halftime of Scream 7, and that's what fuels the second half of the movie, and really brings out a new arc for Sidney. I think that with Kincaid, it would have really hit hard because we knew him from the year 2000. But in some ways, because Joel McHale is probably going to be playing a very light, jovial, nice, everyday kind of dad type, that's also going to hit us hard because we're going to know him solely as Sidney's husband, so I think that there's great stuff here. And whether he lives or dies, I think that there will be an interesting exploration of them as a couple in a marriage, right? But also as mom and dad to the family. I think the family, mother-daughter, is going to be the focus of Scream 7. I think that there's just so much potential that if they do kill off Mark Evans for a truly incredible, earth-shattering arc performance from Neve Campbell, and just an exploration of Sidney Prescott as a final girl, in all these years later.
I honestly think it is the right thing to have him killed off. I don't think one of the children should be killed off. And again, we need those stakes. We really do. And so who better than the husband that we don't really know that is going to likely be this comedic character?
Yeah. Well, and not necessarily like comedic, but like definitely just a lighter presence. I don't think he's going to, I think that Sidney's going to be the military mom. I think she's going to be the overprotective parent. I think he's going to be like, being like, hey, get off of Tatum. I think he's going to be the nice parent. She's going to be the bad parent, or the mean parent, if that makes sense.
I can see that.
And again, so it's interesting within the family dynamic, but it's also interesting just them. And I want to see them in love. I want to see the connection between Mark and Sidney. And I want to care about the marriage before he dies or before stuff starts to happen. Like that's, if I have one request, it would be that, to really develop it and make us care about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very important. Otherwise, if he does die, it would, we're not going to really care, are we? I think it's important, just like with Derek, how they really built him up and they took the time to, make us fall in love with him. They have to do that in a brief time with Evans, I think.
And not to, but like, let's just say Mark Evans does die. Imagine, so Sidney came to Gail whenever Dewey died and was there for her, and now Gail gets to return the favor. I feel like that is such... I know, right? It's going to be such an emotional thing if it happens. I mean, Mark may survive. He may just be the stable sheriff that lasts the whole movie. So, but we're jumping the gun. But in a way that Gail lost the love of her life, Sidney was there for her. Now Gail could possibly return the favor. That could bring out great stuff for Gail. It could be great. There's so much great stuff that Scream 7 has in store.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they can go in so many different directions. I do just hope that it is well done. And even though 5 and 6 are up in my rankings, I do think that the writing, it could have been a lot better. And now that we have Kevin back, Kevin is a co-writer, right? He's not just directing, he's also co-writer.
So because of like the WGA and like the weird union stuff, James Vanderbilt, he gets the story credit, but then Guy Busick gets the written by credit. Kevin, from my understanding and what I've been told, he has severely overhauled the script. And so it's very much a different script than what Guy turned in at the beginning of 2024 or even last summer. So I think that is for the better. And I hope that going forward, if they do make a trilogy, that Kevin gets to be the writer director for 8 and 9, by himself.
Yes, me too. Please.
And, just for the record, let's just say Mark Evans does die. This always leaves the door open for Patrick Dempsey to return in 8 or 9. I don't think that he would be in a great negotiating position after the stunt he pulled with Scream 7, but it is what it is. I don't know. So we'll see how it goes. But... All right. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. Where can they find you online?
I am barely on Twitter.
Good. Me too.
I'm on Instagram at Kevin's Cravings.
Instagram is the place to be. And also Kevin makes these videos. They're very fun. If you loved him in this episode, you'll love seeing his little Instagram videos. I enjoy them. So please go follow Kevin, everybody. And everyone, thank you for listening to this conversation about Sidney's relationships and the men in her life and what's to come or what could come with Scream 7.
Scream with Ryan C. Showers is made possible by supporters like you. All copyrighted material used or referenced in this show belong to their rightful owners and made possible by the Fair Use Act.
And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
Get another beer, you want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back!